Assalamu alaikum. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's lecture on Jesus in Islam. My name is Orhan Kaba. I'm your MC for this evening, and on behalf of ISRA, I extend to you all a warm welcome, and I hope you enjoyed tonight's program. Just before we start, I would like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the original inhabitants of this land, the Wangal and Watagato people of the Darug Nation, and pay them our respects. Just a bit of housekeeping as well. If anyone needs to use the bathrooms, it's outside in the corridor, up the end of the corridor near the lifts. And also please remember, have your phones turned off or to silent mode, inshallah. So our subject tonight is arguably one of the most famous men of history, and more certainly one of the greatest. Jesus is a great prophet of Islam and also the central figure in Christianity. And while we refrain from the exalted status given in Christianity, as Muslims, it is still an article of faith to believe in his prophethood and to love and revere him. So to know more about this great man of history, we have invited Professor Zeki Saritoprak all the way from America to talk about the man, Jesus in Islam. The talk will be followed up by a Q&A session, and we invite you also to stick around after that for some refreshments in the foyer. Professor Zeki Saritoprak is a professor in Islamic studies. He has graduated from Ankara University in the Faculty of Divinity. After completing his Ph.D, he studied further in Egypt for another 5 years. His research focuses on issues related to Islamic theology, spirituality, and eschatology, as well as Islamic approaches to the environment. He's a leading specialist in the thoughts and writings of one of the leading early 20th century Muslim scholars, Bediüzzaman Nursi. Professor Saritoprak has also written on interfaith dialogue and is actively involved in interfaith dialogue, including the Catholic-Muslim dialogues co-sponsored by the US Conference of Catholic Bishops and the Islamic Society of North America. He is the author of 15 books in English, Turkish, and Arabic. And in 2014, Professor Saritoprak published Islam's Jesus. And in 2017, he published a book titled Islamic Spirituality, Faith and Practice for the Modern World. He's now working on a book titled Islamic Eschatology and Afterlife. And with that all said, I invite him to the lectern, Professor Zeki Saritoprak.
Thank you very much, Orhan, for this generous introduction. Good afternoon, good evening. It's evening, right? It's a great pleasure to be here in Sydney. This is my I think, second or third visit to Australia, and particularly Sydney. My topic is Jesus in Islam. As you see, it is the topic of my book, basically. So we will be talking about the content of the book. But it will be the summary of the summary of the summary of the book. So don't forget to read the book. You know, it is important. It's important because I spent 6 years on this book, and I think it is worth reading. You know, if somebody spends 6 years on a book, it has to be read. So before we start, I will test you. I will ask you some questions. I know that you will ask me questions at the end. So I will ask you some questions. And these questions for all, Muslims, Christians, Jews, whoever, you know, in the audience we have, everybody is participating. So what is the most frequently used title for Jesus in the Qur'an? Ruh Allah. Well, both are very good, and the titles of Jesus. But I will wait a little bit. Let's see what else other people are saying. Any answer from this side? Al-Masih. Al-Masih and Kalima. Yeah, that's very good. Actually, Al-Masih is a title for Jesus. Al-Kalima, Kalimatun min Allah is a title for Jesus. It's true. The Word of God. Al-Masih, the Messiah. Yeah, these are titles of Jesus. Let's see what else. The Son of Mary. I think someone said Son of Mary. Let's see what else. A prophet, yeah. A prophet is a title for Jesus. So, no? That's the odd answer? You have one? What is the? Isa. Isa actually is not title. It's the name of Jesus. Is Abdullah, yes. Abdullah is a title for Jesus, the servant of God. So now going to the answer. Actually, the answer is the Son of Mary. Somebody said here. You did, and then another person on this side said. So the most frequently used title for Jesus in the Qur'an is the Son of Mary. And it's very compatible with the biblical term. In the Bible, it says the Son of Man. And this Quranic term is compatible with that because the Son of Man in that phrase doesn't mean male, it means human being. So Jesus is the son of human being, Mary is a human being. So Jesus is the son of Mary. And referring to his mother, which is also a very important figure in Islam. So the second question, is there a chapter in the Quran named after Jesus?
Yes.
Which one?
No, it's Maryam.
Yes, chapter Maryam. Yeah, no, that's not named after Jesus. That's after Maryam. Is there a chapter in the Quran named after Jesus?
No.
Yes. Yes. No. Maida is the name after Jesus' story, but not Jesus.
No, there isn't.
There isn't. You say yes? Just yes for the sake of yes?
I've seen YouTube of you this before another lecture, so I'm cheating.
Oh, you're cheating. That is not acceptable. So Googling is not good, and then cheating is not acceptable. So there is a consensus that no chapter in the Quran.
But there is one chapter, Ali Imran, which is his family, basically.
Yeah, but his family, not himself. So you all agree, Muslims, brothers, sisters? There is one, but you forgot. It's not counted. You have to explain which one. Yeah.
That's right. I did the same.
Yes. You think that there is no chapter? I mean, I understand your point.
It's not the famous one, basically. There might be a second name for one of the chapters.
Yes, okay. Okay, that's a very good point. In fact, there is a chapter in the Quran named after Jesus. Quranic names have various, Quranic chapters could have various names. Like, for example, the first chapter of the Quran, Al-Fatiha. Do you know that it has another name?
Yeah.
Many names. Many names. For example, one of these names is Al-Shafiyah. Al-Shafiyah means the healing. So Fatiha is also Al-Shafiyah. In the same way, chapter 61 in the Quran is named now in the list of the Quranic chapters as Al-Saf, which means the row of angels. But there is another name for it, and that is Al-Hawariyun, which means the disciples of Jesus. And the third name of that chapter is Isa, and that is Jesus. So we have a chapter named after Jesus in the Quran, actually. And if I was talking with a professor from Lebanon, her native language is Arabic, and he said, it seems like this is like a made up. There is no chapter in the Quran named after Jesus. And I said, you can just Google Arabic and say, what are the names of chapter 61 in the Quran? Google in Arabic language. And she Googled it, and immediately came 3 names. I said, now you have proven your case. So there is a chapter in the Quran, basically. Do Muslims believe in the second coming of Jesus?
Yes, we do, but I want to be clear that he won't be born again. He'll come again.
He will come again. So Muslims believe in the second coming of Jesus. There is a consensus on this. All people agree on this. Yeah, it is true. There is. Okay. So who was Jesus? First, he was born of the Virgin Mary. That means Mary was not touched by any human being. The birth of Jesus was a miracle. Jesus was born miraculously. And this is something that Christians and Muslims are in agreement because it is in the Qur'an. There is no father for Jesus. There is no physical father for Jesus. Jesus' birth is a miracle. There is no father, basically. He is bringer of peace. He will bring peace. And this is in the Hadith literature, that when he comes back, he will bring peace. He is one of the 5 elite prophets in Islam, along with Noah, Abraham, Moses, and Muhammad. Peace and blessings be upon them all. So there are many prophets in Islam. Some narrations suggest that there are 124,000 prophets. There are so many. Among them, 5 are the greatest. And these are Noah, Abraham, Moses, Jesus, and Muhammad. Peace and blessings be upon them. So basically, they are the greatest of all human beings. And that's why, for example, if I say who, as a great person in history, which person comes to your mind? Alexander the Great, like very, very great. But in comparison to Jesus, these are nothing. The great giants of philosophy, Aristotle, Plato, in comparison to these 5 people, they are considerably low. So these 5 people are the highest of all human beings, not only until our time, until the end of time. Until the end of time. So that's why when Muslims speak of Jesus as a prophet of God, this is a very important topic. I mean, it's a very important level, a very important title given to Jesus. It's not, in the English language, sometimes the word prophet is used loosely. Anyone who speaks about future is a prophet. That's not Islamic understanding of prophethood. Jesus is speaking on behalf of God, so it's a very important position. He is a Muslim. Jesus is a Muslim. Do you realize that I put differently? What is the difference, you see? Underlined, yeah, you can see that. Yeah, Muslim with lowercase m. Why I put Muslim with lowercase m? Because in Arabic language, there is no lowercase and uppercase m. All are the same. And that's why Arabic language is encompassing. But when we translate this into English, it makes big difference. So Jesus is a Muslim with lowercase m. That means he submits himself to the will of God. So anyone who submits himself or herself to the will of God is a Muslim. And Abraham was a Muslim. Noah was a Muslim. With lowercase m, it is very large concept. And it's very important. Sometimes I share this story. I remember I was giving this talk. I think it was at the University of Toronto. And a Muslim professor raised his hand and he said, addressing me, he said, Professor, I like Jesus to be Muslim with capital M. As if capital M is greater, because capital. And I said, be careful. Sometimes you may be a Muslim with capital M, but not Muslim with lowercase m. It's very important. Sometimes you may be a Muslim, your name is a Muslim, But actually, you are not Muslim in the sight of God because you have not submitted yourself to the will of God. So lowercase m is more important. It's very, very important, basically, lowercase m. And then I explained to him, and I think he got it after that. So Jesus is a miracle worker. We'll speak of miracles a little bit. In the Qur'an, there are references to his miracles. He is an intercessor in the afterlife. God gives the people that God wants the power of intercession. So the prophets of God, because they are beloved by God, God accepts their intercession. Jesus in the primary Islamic sources, first I like to say it's about Jesus in the Qur'an. I know we are familiar with the Quranic concepts and also in the Hadith. So the Hadith, for those who are not familiar with the term Hadith, Hadith is a reference to the sayings of the Prophet. All sayings of the Prophets are known as Hadith. And we have a large literature in the Hadith tradition about Jesus. He mentioned in more than 90 verses of the Quran. Something is mentioned in the Quran, it is important. Even a hint in the Quran is very important. How about a person is mentioned 90 times with various titles and names? So it makes a really very important personality in the Islamic tradition. He is characterized by his message, Jesus' message. That means the message that he received from God. And that is Injil, which is the Islamic term for the gospel. So Injil is a divine book according to the Islamic teaching. And the Quran refers to Injil as the book that was revealed to Jesus. Therefore, that's his message, the message of Jesus. In a chapter 3, verse 49 to 53, we have something about the miracles of Jesus. The verse says, "Surely I came to you with a sign from your Lord." So Jesus speaks in the Quran. He says, "I came to you, O people, with a sign from your Lord. I create from clay the likeness of a bird, then I breathe into it, and it becomes a bird by God's permission." So Jesus would make shapes of birds from clay, and he would breathe into it, and it would become a living bird, flying. I mean, this is a miracle. Everybody can make a shape of a bird from clay, but when you breathe into it, it doesn't become a bird. And that is the issue. And that's why in Islam, the breath of Jesus is very important, is referred to as healing. And there are some, in the continuation of the verse, it says, "I heal those born blind and the leper, and I resurrect the dead person by God's permission." A dead person. Jesus would call and the person will be resurrected. That's what the Quran says about Jesus. So he had miracles. Why these miracles were given? In the Islamic theology, all prophets of God would receive miracles to show that they are speaking on behalf of God. They are not liars. They are true people. And how do we know that they are true people? Because God changes his rules for their sake. And that's why something that is beyond natural laws happening through their actions. And this is one example. Another aspect that Jesus mentioned in the Quran, in this verse, Jesus confirms the Torah. So in the Islamic teaching, when Jesus came, Jesus did not reject the Torah. He confirmed the principles of the Torah. And that's why, in fact, it's very compatible with the Islamic teaching, because in Islam, as you know, even at the young age, we teach our children, Muslim would teach their children as we believe in 4 great books of God. 4 great books. The Torah, the Psalms, the Gospel, and the Qur'an. The Torah was revealed to Moses. The Psalms was revealed to David. And the Gospel was revealed to Jesus, and the Qur'an was revealed to Muhammad. We believe in all of them. And therefore, it's very significant that Jesus also confirmed the Torah. When he came, he confirmed the Torah. And the verse continues. It says, I have come to you with a proof from your Lord. So fear God and obey me. Truly, God is my Lord and your Lord. So worship only God. The Quranic verse says. And this is also a very important principle in Islam, that you cannot worship anything other than God. You cannot worship Jesus, for example. You cannot worship the prophets of God. You love them, but you cannot worship them. Worshipping is only for God. You have to love, you have to respect the messengers of God, but when it comes to worship, you cannot worship anything other than God. It's a very significant principle in Islam. Your love is important, but not at the level of worship. You cannot worship. And this is true for all other people. You know, you cannot worship Mary, for example. You cannot worship saints. They are the worshippers of God. Jesus, the prophets of God, other prophets were the great worshippers of God, but not to be worshipped. Confirming the Torah and receiving a new message from God, the gospel. So Jesus, yes, confirmed the Torah, but also received a new message, and that was the gospel. So basically, in the Islamic teaching, all prophets, especially Rasuls, those who receive revelation from God, they receive a revelation that is addressing the situations of their people in their time. So, for example, in the time of Jesus, healing was a very important subject. God supported Jesus with the miracle of healing. In the time of the Prophet of Islam, eloquence was a very important topic. Eloquence, to speak beautifully, write, poetry, speak poetically. And because of that, God supported the Prophet with eloquence. People, when they would hear the verses of the Qur'an, they would prostrate before these verses. Because they would say, we are not Muslim, but we are prostrating because of the eloquence of this verse. And actually, even today, the Qur'an is unsurpassable when it comes to eloquence. God supported the Prophet of Islam with this miracle. Similarly, in the time of Moses, magics were very common. So God supported Moses with some miracles that was able to swallow the magics of the magicians of Pharaoh. So Moses was able to actually defeat the sorcerers of Pharaoh. In this verse, that verse that I mentioned, chapter 61, which is, I said, named after Jesus, Jesus asks for help. Who are my helpers in the cause of God? Jesus asks, and the disciples of Jesus respond. They say, we are your helpers in the cause of God. So the Quran actually clearly says, O believers, O who you believe, be God's helpers, like the disciples of Jesus. When Jesus asked, who would be my helper in the cause of God? They said, we are your helpers. So, O believers, be like the disciples of Jesus. Imitate the disciples of Jesus, as they were the helpers in the cause of God. So now I like to move to another aspect about the place of Jesus in the Islamic tradition. And this is about the coming of Jesus. You remember we had a question in the beginning Do Muslims believe in the second coming of Jesus? So I have to confess, I prepared my research on this subject. I didn't know that there were so many books written on the subject of the descent of Jesus. In the Islamic literature known as Nuzul Isa. Nuzul Isa, which means the descent of Jesus. I found more than 100 pamphlets and books on the subject. Some of them are very inflammatory, as if Jesus is coming tomorrow. You know, especially some short pamphlets would put some hadith, some sayings of the Prophet together, and well, they distribute around the cities, the Islamic cities, and then wait for Jesus. He's coming. That is generally the mentality, the idea. So I put all them together and categorize them. I categorize them into 3 categories. And feel free to choose the one that you like, you know. I don't force you to accept a specific one, but I have my own opinion on which one is the best. The first is called the modernist approach. This is by some modernist Muslim philosophers, modern Muslim philosophers. They would say there is no way to accept the second coming of Jesus. A person who died 2,000 years ago cannot come back. Forget about it. Well, it's philosophical modern approach, you know. What is the percentage of this group in the overall literature? I would say maybe 2%. You know, it's not like a big percentage. The second one, maybe this is the largest one, probably, the literalist approach. This group, those who are, you know, focusing from literalist perspective, interpret the text in a literal sense. They say Jesus will come from sky directly. You will see Jesus coming from sky. I remember once I asked that person, I said, so you believe that when Jesus comes, CNN, ABC will have an interview with him? And he said, yes, why not? He will come, and everybody will know about it, and CNN and ABC will have an interview with Jesus. So this is the literalist approach, as if Jesus will come with parachute, you know, like from sky. And the third approach, I call it in the interpretive approach. It accepts the descent of Jesus, but in a different way. And that's my favorite approach. Because there are so many hadith. I found over 100 hadith about the coming of Jesus in Islam. These, yes, you can say 2 of them are fabricated. 5 of them are fabricated. 10 of them are fabricated. But there are really sound hadith. You cannot say all of them are fabricated. So, okay, then what's the meaning of this? So I found prominent Islamic scholars who would interpret. They would say this is actually what the Prophet meant. Interpreting the hadith. I will elaborate on this and give several examples. And my argument for this is that the Prophet used allegorical language. Not always, but especially when it comes about future events, the Prophet used allegorical language. So, for example, in one occasion, Aisha radiallahu anha narrates. This is another story, but indication of how the Prophet used allegorical language. Aisha says, we asked the Prophet, the messenger of God, which of us will meet you first in the afterlife? Because they love the Prophet. And they like to be first. Even after his death, they like to be first meeting with the Prophet. This hadith is in Al-Bukhari. It's very famous, well-known hadith. And the Prophet says, the one whose hands are the longest. And Aisha says, we started measuring our hands. Whose hands are the longest? Then, after a while, after the Prophet passed away, Zainab, radiallahu anha, passed away, and her hands were not the longest. we understood, Aisha says, the wife of the Prophet, Aisha says, we understood that the Prophet meant the one who gives charity the most. Because in Arabic language, when you say someone, his hand or her hand is the longest, means gives the most charity. So the most charitable person. And really Zainab was the most charitable person among us. She's very well known for her charity and charitable behavior. So that is why the Prophet uses allegorical language. And this is very common in Arabic language. For example, again, if you say in Arabic language, there is a pile of trash in front of the person's house. What is the meaning of this? If you go and look for trash in front of his house, that will be a wrong understanding of statement. Actually, in Arabic language, it means this person is generous. Because if there is a pile of trash, that means he has more guests. That means he cooks a lot. That means there will be a lot of trash. And therefore, he is generous. So Islamic scholars who are looking at this Arabic allegorical language, they would say, even if there is no trash in front of the house of the person, but you say this statement and the person is generous, this statement is true. Because the person is generous. But even if there are piles of trash in front of the person's house, but he's not generous, that means that statement is not true. So you have to look from allegorical perspective. But this doesn't mean that, well, okay, then everything is allegorical. No. Some cases. Okay, then should you say salat, allegorical? No. Because essence of religion are there. You cannot say that these are all allegorical. So you have to have a balance, but it is true that the Prophet used allegorical language occasionally. Okay, some hints in the Quran. Is the coming of Jesus mentioned in the Quran? I found some hints, and this is about the speaking of Jesus from his cradle. Jesus will speak to humanity from his cradle and in manhood, and he is one of the righteous. So Jesus spoke from his cradle. It's a very famous story in the Quran. I asked one of my Christian colleagues, and I said, do you have this miracle of Jesus in the gospel? And he said, no, we don't have. Actually, in canonical gospels, there is no reference to the miracle of Jesus that he spoke from his cradle. It's only in the Quran. So according to the story, you are familiar, I'm sure. Can I have a little water? According to the story, Mary sees angel. It's believed that angel Gabriel gives good news about her pregnancy. Angel says, Mary, you will be pregnant. God will give you a pure child. And Mary is surprised. Says, how can I become pregnant? I'm not touched by any human being. And angel says, this is the command of God. When God wants something, it happens. Just command, be, the command of be. In Arabic, kun. Kun. When God says kun, everything happens. Everything is easy for God. So Mary becomes pregnant and gives birth to Jesus. But she's afraid. This is a symbol of chastity. Such a pious person now has a child. How she will explain to her people? Who would believe in her? The Quran refers to her frustration. It says, she said, I wish I was just become forgotten. How I will explain to my people? So God inspires her, in fact gives her revelation, wahi. And that's why some Islamic scholars will say because she received the revelation, she is considered a prophet of God. According to Imam al-Ash'ari, it is possible that she is a prophet of God. God says, when they ask you, don't speak. Just use sign language. Don't speak. Don't answer with your speaking. And it happens, she takes the child to her people. And they say, Mary, where did you get this child? You are not a bad person. Your mother was not a bad person. Your father was not a bad person. The Qur'an speaks of this actually in a detailed way. Where did you get this baby? So Mary doesn't speak, and she points at the baby. As if she says, don't ask me, ask the baby. And they say, actually, how can we ask a baby who is in his cradle? So according to the Quranic story, Jesus immediately speaks. And this remarkable statement in the Quran, speaking of Jesus. Inni Abdullah, I am the servant of God. Atani al-kitab, he gave me the book. Wajalani nabiyya, made me a prophet. And the verse continues. He commanded me to give charity, to pray. And peace be upon me when I was born. Peace be upon me when I will die. Peace be upon me when I will be resurrected. And God commanded me to be kind to my mother. And it's believed that after that, Jesus didn't speak until the age of speaking, like 2 years later. So this is a miracle of Jesus. So Islamic scholars say this verse is actually referring also to the second speech of Jesus, which will be in manhood when he comes back. He will speak again. So that is, the way that Muslim commentators will refer to the speaking of Jesus. The other verse, it's clear. It says a sign for the hour. Jesus is a sign for the hour. So when Jesus comes, that means the hour is close, is very near. The afterlife is very near. In the Hadith literature, there is a Hadith. As I said, there are many Hadith. And actually in my book, I have a section on this in a detailed way. So you can read all of them from there. But I will just have few of them. By God Almighty, in whose hand my soul is, Jesus, the son of Mary, will soon descend among you as a just ruler. He will come and he will bring justice and peace.
What's the source of the hadith?
It's in Al-Bukhari. The hadith is in Al-Bukhari, actually. Very well-known hadith. In Al-Bukhari, Al-Muslim, I think maybe in 6 hadith references. Another hadith is that the Prophet says, it has been shown to me while I was sleeping. Again, the hadith is in Al-Bukhari. In my dream, while I was circumambulating the Kaaba, I saw a man of brown color. The best one can see among brown-colored human beings. So Jesus, in this hadith, is known as a brown color. In America, I asked some of my colleagues, what is the color of Jesus in America? I said, pure white. Well, it seems like he was not pure white. He was brown color, actually. And I mean, if you look at the people in the area, it's much more natural to have actually brown color. So the hadith continues. It speaks of the cleanliness of Jesus. Cleanliness of Jesus. The hadith says he was so clean that as if he was just coming out of shower and water was dripping from his head, indicating the utmost level of cleanliness of Jesus. As you know, in Islam, cleanliness is half of religion. And therefore, it's very significant. So Jesus is actually symbol of cleanliness also in the Islamic teaching. The Prophet presents Jesus that way. And the Prophet said, I asked, who is this person? And they said, Jesus, the son of Mary. So in the Bible, as many of my Christian colleagues told me, there is no big reference about the feature of Jesus. And that's why sometimes you see Jesus as pure white, sometimes black, sometimes totally like a Korean child, because it's different. You know, we have different features of Jesus. But in this hadith, you have some actually interesting features of Jesus, about his color, about his hair, about his cleanliness, etc. So it gives some sense of Jesus' features.
Is it also implying that when Jesus ﷺ was raised, he just had a shower and he came out to the disciples? So he would be resurrected in that form?
It could be, yeah, it could be. Again, another hadith, the Prophet says, "O Jesus," it's about Jesus and the Islamic community. The hadith says, "Surely Jesus, the Messiah, will find some people from among my community as his helpers." Some of my community members will be the helpers of Jesus, the hadith says. And the Prophet speaks of this, it says, addressing to his own companions, they are like you or even better than you. 3 times. The hadith says 3 times the Prophet repeated, they are like you or even better than you. And then it goes, God will not disgrace a community of which I am the beginning and Jesus the end. So the Prophet gives a great good news to the Muslim community that because I am the beginning of the Muslim community and because Jesus is the end, God will not disgrace this community. So there is a hope. You know, the Prophet gives a great hope to the Muslim community. In the Sufi literature, I think I will skip this part. I speak of Rumi and many other mystics, how they look at Jesus. So I will refer to my book so that you can have a chance to read it. Jesus is a prophet of love in the Islamic teaching. And some Islamic scholars, I would say like Nursi, for example, Bediuzzaman Said Nursi, used this aspect of Jesus. He used it for in his own philosophy. For example, he says to love, love, and to hate, hatred. If you love, love, love will increase. If you hate, hatred, hatred will decrease. In fact, Nursi says, there is nothing deserves hatred more than hatred itself. There is nothing deserves hatred more than hatred itself. The only thing that deserves hatred, hatred itself. So that is the philosophy, and Fethullah Gülen also actually has several. I found several articles that he wrote on this concept of love, which is from an Islamic perspective is very significant. As you know, one of the names of God is Al-Wadud, the one who loves and the one who is beloved. God loves, God love, and God is beloved. So 3. God is love, God is beloved, and God is the lover. Now coming to those interpretations, one of famous interpretations is famous Egyptian theologian, scholar, Muhammad Abduh. He is in modern era. Unlike his contemporaries, modernist contemporaries in Egypt, he has a different approach to the subject. He says the essence of Jesus and his ruling on earth can be interpreted as the dominance of his spirit and his enigmatic message to people. This is what dominates Jesus' teachings of commanding mercy, love, and peace. He says that is the meaning of the coming of Jesus. Love, mercy, and peace. If these themes are dominating our world, that means Jesus is there. Don't wait for a person coming from sky. These are the essence of the message of Jesus. He says, the time of Jesus' descent is a time when people take the spirit of religion and the spirit of Islamic law to heart to reform their inner life without sticking to the forms and appearances. Inner life. Because inner life is so significant in Islam. That is heart. Everything is there. Faith is in the heart, you know. If there is no faith there, everything is empty. And that's why the inner life is the most significant aspect in the Islamic teaching. And he says three themes: mercy, love, and peace. These are actually the essence of the message of Jesus. Al-Mawli Muhammad Hamdi Yazir also has an interesting approach. I will skip that one for the sake of time. And then I would like to go to Nursi. Bediüzzaman Said Nursi has also a very interesting approach. Dialogue between Muslims and Christians to bring justice and peace to our world. He is emphasizing this dimension. And he says, Muslims and Christians who have dedicated themselves to justice and spiritual life will fulfill the meaning of the coming of Jesus. That is to bring justice and peace to our world. A renewal of Christianity, he speaks of a renewal of Christianity that will be more closer to the essence of the message of Jesus. And that will eventually bring Muslims and Christians. In one place, he says the people of the book, Muslims and the people of the book together. And they will contribute to the world peace. Now, this is very significant because in my book, I have a long chapter on this dimension. I made a rough calculation. Muslims, Christians, and Jews together constitute more than half of humanity, about 58% of world population. And they have so common ground, so common themes. If they can come together, they can really bring peace to the world. They can contribute greatly. They can change. They can make a big change. And they have, there are many reasons for them to come together. And Nursi understands from that dimension. Is this compatible with the teaching of Islam? I would say in the Qur'an there is actually verses that are encouraging this direction. For example, verse in chapter 3, verse 64, which says, O people of the book, come to a common word between us, that all of us worship none but God. The invitation is to the people of the book, Christians and Jews. In the Quranic language, the term people of the book is used for Christians and Jews. Come together. Let's come together to a common word, to a common ground. And then what is this largest encompassing umbrella? To believe in one God. We all believe in one God. Let's come together under this umbrella and then work for the betterment of our society. Work for the betterment of human beings and bring peace to our world. That is the message of the Quran. The Quranic invitation. This is from the Quran, inviting the people of the book to come together. Diversity is a divine plan. The Quranic verse says, if God willed, He could have made you one community, but He has not, in order to test you with what He has given you. Therefore, the Quran says, vie with one another for good deeds. Vie with one another for good deeds. And sometimes I say, there is no loser in this competition, because everybody is winning. When you vie with one another for good deeds, you do some good deeds, the other person does some good deeds. So basically, you are all helping each other. Everybody is winning in this competition. That's the Quranic invitation, and this is to all human beings. Vie with one another for good deeds. Dialogue again in the Quran. There is also one story I like to share with you, and this is in the early Islam. That was the first encounter between Muslims and Christians. Muslims were persecuted in Mecca. The Prophet said, there is a Christian king, no one is wronged in his land. So go there. Take refuge in his land. And it's believed that the second migration to Abyssinia were about 70 people, 50 male, 20 female Muslims migrated to Abyssinia, modern-day Ethiopia, all the way from Mecca to this place. And they found a refuge there. Salama, the wife of the, later will become the wife of the Prophet, she migrated with her husband. Her husband passes away, and then she marries the Prophet later. She narrates the story. She says, we were persecuted in Mecca. But when we went to Abyssinia, we found a place of safety. We were able to practice our religion freely. So she appreciates. Meccan elite sent a delegation to Abyssinia to bring them back. And to make a long story short, they were unable. King Negus says to Muslims, you can live in Abyssinia as long as you wish. And Muslims remained in Abyssinia for a long time. That was the first encounter. Otherwise, all these Muslims probably would be killed by the pagans of Mecca. But they were protected by a Christian king. And the Prophet of Islam loved King Negus, sends him letters, and he responded to the Prophet. When he passed away, it's believed that Angel Gabriel, on the same day, informs the Prophet that King Negus passed away. The Prophet asks his companions to come together and have a prayer for King Negus in absentia. Salatul Janazah fil Ghaib. It's in the Islamic tradition. It became a terminology in the Islamic tradition that you can have a funeral prayer in absentia for someone who is not there. And that was first happened with the prayer, funeral prayer over Najashi, the king of Ethiopia. So it is going on. This trend continued for a long time, and I think in our time we have very good dialogue activities. I personally participated in several of them. This was in the United States Christian Muslim Dialogue, co-sponsored by U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops and Islamic Society of North America. They are coming together annually, and always they discuss Islamic terms, Christian terms. This one, the upper one, was Muslim Baptist dialogue. Generally, they say Baptists are very strict. They don't come together with Muslims. But actually, they had dialogue with Muslims. They were joking. Perhaps this will be the first and the last meeting between Muslims and Baptists. But actually, when I participated, it was the second annual meeting between Muslims and Baptists. So it's a good news with that regard. This one between adherents of various traditions, including Hinduism, Buddhism, essentially Abrahamic traditions and Hinduism and Buddhism. And this was Pope Benedict XVI who visited a mosque in Turkey. As you know, he damaged the Muslim-Christian relation through one of his speeches in Germany. But then he repaired that damage to a certain extent. He went to Turkey and prayed in the mosque. So, final thoughts. Basically, my argument is that if this trend of dialogue continues, I think it will contribute to the bringing of peace to our world, and I think also it will be the fulfillment of the message of Jesus and Muhammad. Peace and blessings be upon them. Thank you very much.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. First of all, I would like to thank our esteemed scholar from all the way from United States, Professor Zeki Saritoprak. He is truly a modern day scholar, not only an excellent academic. I think some of our staff here, when they were doing their Ph.D, he was the examiner for them. But he's also a scholar that comes from the Islamic tradition as well as he has it wouldn't be good to say that in front of him, but he has a very excellent spiritual life as well. So he's a good example to us all to aspire to come to that level. This topic is an interesting topic. You know, we live in a predominantly Christian country. Isa alayhi salam, or Jesus, is an important figure in Islam, and it's actually, other than Christianity, Islam is the only religion that recognizes Jesus in a very significant way, and I think that's significant as well, and it just makes us a bit more having some ground commonality between Jews and Christians and Muslims. And I want to thank all of you for coming here today to attend this evening lectures as well. If you would like to join our courses, you know, Islamic Studies program, feel free to do so. You know, Bachelor of Islamic Studies, Master of Islamic Studies, it's an excellent course, inshallah. But more importantly, I think we need to be active as people who engages with our neighbors, people around us as Muslims. I think one of the most important aspects that breaks barriers is when Muslims actually meet non-Muslims. If they are finding out about Muslims and Islam through media in a negative way, nothing beats personal experience. If somebody has a positive experience with a Muslim, that erases everything that they get from the media. I've seen this many times. So I would encourage all of you to talk to your colleagues at work, you know, to your neighbors or in universities, other students. Let's get engaged out there, inshallah. Just wanted to maybe also highlight on 14th of April, inshallah, we will be holding a National Muslim Youth Summit. So those of you who are still young, and what was the age limit?
Sub-30.
Sub-30, yeah, under 30. You know, we have many events for all ages, you know, even like today. But this particular one, we thought that we give Muslim youth a voice. They can come and talk about issues for themselves, talk about their future. We've done this in 2016, first time in Canberra. It was a great success. Inshallah, it will be repeated in Sydney this time. Visit our website. If you are under 30 years of age, just register, please. We look forward to that event, inshallah. So thank you very much. Have a good evening.